Ancus Marcius, nepos numae Pompilii, quartos rex creatus est. Okay, subject Ancus Marcius. This entire phrase describes him. It is an apposition to him. Nepos talks about him being a relative of Numa, so this is a genitive modifying that. Quartus rex, okay, like apparently he became a king, and then there's your passive verb, creatus est. Ut numa in pace religiones instituerat, sic ancus ceremonias instituit, quibus bella postea indicta sunt. First thing you should notice is we have an ut here. Well, does that introduce some sort of subjunctive clause, or is it just ut meaning like or as? We can tell because the verb in that clause, instituerat, is pluperfect indicative. So it's not some sort of subjunctive clause. It's not a purpose clause because a purpose clause takes a subjunctive. This is an indicative. Ut plus the indicative usually means as. So that tells you how to do this dependent clause. As numa in pace prepositional phrase. Religiones direct object. And so as numa had done this to this in peace, thus we have some sort of parallel construction going on. Ancus did this to ceremonias. So just like this, thus this thing happened in a similar way. So we've got the subject, verb, direct object here. And then we've got this quibus thing going on, which introduces, of course, a relative clause, which starts here and ends here. So what is the antecedent of quibus? It's probably something plural because the ibus. And if you go back, the closest plural thing that could be antecedent would be ceremonias. So we're going to draw that arrow there, by means of which, bella is the subject of your relative clause, postea adverb, and then here you have a passive verb, indicta sunt. We'll keep going there. Sacerdotes, quibus id negotium mandatum est, vetiales appellavit. So, sacerdotes, nominative or accusative plural. Hold that thought and we'll have to find out because we're not sure yet. Oh, we've got another quibus thing, another relative clause coming up. Starts there, ends there. Id, subject, direct object, not sure because it's neuter. So we have to keep going again. Id negotium, I'm anticipating that id modifies negotium, this business or responsibility. Oh, mandatum est, there's your verb. Okay, this clears everything up. Mandatum est is passive, perfect passive, of course. Mandatum is neuter right there. So I'm assuming that id negotium is the subject of mandatum est, and then quibus here is dative because something is handed over to a dative. And the quibus, of course, is referring to the priests. So we're still waiting to see what the priests are doing in their main clause, and then we have it down here. Vetiales appellavit. We have a singular verb, so the priests cannot possibly be the subject of appellavit. Rather, they are the direct object. And then the presence of vetiales, another accusative noun, tells us we have a factitive sentence. That's where you have a nominative, and then a verb, and then two accusatives in a row. So in that sort of a sentence, you have the subject makes accusative 1 into accusative 2, which is what we have here. Ancus called accusative 1, accusative 2. So that's the way of naming things with the factitive sentence. Okay, moving on. Bellis cum urbis Latinorum gestis, cives Romam traduxit. Okay, here we have, let's see, an ablative noun, bellis, prepositional phrase, cum urbibus Latinorum, because Latinorum modifies that. And then gestis, oh, another ablative. I wonder what kind of construction takes an ablative noun and an ablative participle, ding, 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 ablative absolute. And we translate that with noun participle, with bellies having been waged, and then you can do the rest of that. Okay, cives, again, we've got more ambiguity, nominative or accusative. Well, the singular verb traduxit tells us cives must be the direct object because and traduxit is singular. So he did this to the citizens Romam. That's how you say to Rome. It's locative. You can look that up if you've forgotten it, but it's just to Rome. Ianiculum, qui callis trans Tiberum est, cum urbe ponte sublicio conjunxit. Okay, the Ianiculum is one of the 7 hills of Rome. And in this sentence here, it is accusative. Relative clause coming up, starting here, ending here. Qui callis, callis, of course, is the word for hill. So qui in this instance is pointing to which hill? The Ianiculum, which is a hill where? On the other side of the Tiber River, trans Tiberum. Okay, what about this Ianiculum hill on the other side of the Tiber River? We've got a prepositional phrase first. Be careful. It obviously starts with cum, but where does it end? Urbe is a noun, and ponte sublicio is also a noun in the ablative case. So are these both the object of cum? Well, they can't be because they're not connected. So we have urbe here acting as an ablative because it's the object of cum, but then we have a different ablative noun functioning in a different way next door. Don't get tripped up by that. So he conjunxit, he joined the Ianiculum. How did he join the Ianiculum? Or he joined it with the city, and he used Ponte Sublicio, a very famous bridge, the Sublicium Bridge. I would have put this in the culture, but I can't because it doesn't exist anymore because it was made out of wood. It didn't last that long. Okay, next. Carcer, qui etiam nunc extat, sub monte Capitolino aedificatus est. Ooh, another interesting thing that you can visit in Rome now. The Carcer, and then we have a nice relative clause describing it. Okay, and I'm not even going to touch that relative clause because I think you can handle it. It's pretty easy. Prepositional phrase, sub monte Capitolino. Again, Rome has 7 hills. The Ianiculum is one, and so is the Capitoline. It's the biggest hill, so sometimes they call it a monte, even though it's really just a hill. And then here's your passive verb, aedificatus est. So the main part of the sentence here is Carcer aedificatus est. Imperium usque ad mare prolatum est, et in ore Tiberus ostia urbs condita est. Okay, imperium here, neuter, so is it nominative or accusative? Hold that thought and we'll find out. Before we find out what it's doing in the sentence, we know that we have a prepositional phrase, ad mare. Oh, and then here's your verb, prolatum est. Again, this is passive and it's got the um ending. So since it's passive, it's not going to take a direct object. Imperium, also neuter, so that must be a nominative subject. And then here's your verb. And then we'll continue our sentence, et in ore, prepositional phrase. And if you look, ore is ablative, and Tiberus is genitive, so I'm assuming that it's going to modify the ore. So that also is part of our prepositional phrase. Then we have a nominative noun, ostia, and that is, by the way, a nearby city. So that is the subject of condita est. So your main sentence is, well, you have 2 of them, imperium prolatum est, and then the next clause, et ostia urbs condita est. Enco regnante, vir quidam nomine lucumo habitabat. And of course, we have to finish the sentence on the next page. But before we go, we can see that we have this relative clause, right? Not relative clause, ablative absolute. So, during his reign, vir quidam. Oh, here is our subject, nominative. And notice we've got that quidam. Whenever you put that dom on the end of a Q word, it means a certain man. What do we know about this guy? His name is Lucumo. And we know that he was alive, or he was living somewhere during Ancus's reign, and we'll have to turn the page to see what happens next. Okay, continuing on for the previous sentence, we're just taking the main part. A certain guy was living. Where was he living? In Tarquinia. And what was that? That was an Etruscan city. Remember, the Etruscans were the big guys on the block during the time of the early Romans. Pater eius erat de Maratus Profugus Corinthus. Okay, so this Lucumo is so important that we're going to spend the rest of the chapter talking about him. Ancus Marcus did a bunch of interesting things, but Lucumo is really the focus here. So what do we know about him? We've got a genitive noun, or a genitive pronoun, telling us who his dad was. His dad, and that's right there, that's his name. Profugus is a noun here, and it is an apposition to Demaratus, describing him. So he was a refugee from this place, from Corinth. Lucumo in matrimonium tanaquilem mulierem nobilem duxerat. Okay, Lucumo, of course, is our subject. Prepositional phrase into marriage. Tanaquil, that is a woman's name. Here's a phrase that describes the woman. Mulierem nobilem, and then, of course, here's the verb. So it's Lucumo duxerat tanaquilem in matrimonium. Etrusci spernebat Lucumonem, exulis filium. Okay, so subject, verb, direct object. Oh my gosh, how often do we see that sort of simple construction in a sentence? Okay, this is another phrase in apposition to Lucumonem, describing him. So filium is accusative because it goes with Lucumonum, and then exulis, of course, is a genitive noun modifying filium and referring to Demaratus up there. Tanaquil, quae fere indignatem non poterat, consilium migrandi Romam capit. Okay, talking about the wife, Tanaquil, relative clause, qui fere down to here. Why is fere infinitive? Because poterat takes an infinitive, so fere is a complementary infinitive. Fere poterat, and indignitatem, of course, is the direct object of this verb. Relative clause talking about Tanaquil. Quae goes to her, and then here's the rest of the sentence. Direct object. Oh, what's this nd word? Is it a gerund or a gerundive? And how do we even know the difference? A gerund is a verbal noun, and a gerundive is a verbal adjective. I'm looking at this saying, well, I don't see anything being modified by migrandi. There is no noun that agrees in case, number, and gender. So it's probably a gerund, and, maybe I'm right. Anyways, so since this is a gerund, it is genitive, so it is a plan of leaving. That's how we translate the gerund, the plan of leaving. And then we see this Romam, which we saw previously, that is locative. It means to roam. So Tanaquil conceived of a plan of leaving, probably for Rome, because they weren't having a good time in Etruria. Faucale conjugi persuadet. Okay, conjugi is dative here, and that's because you always persuade a dative. Faucale, boring adverb. Dum iter faciunt, aquila dicatur Pileum ab capite Lucumonis abstulissa et rursus repausuisse. Ooh, interesting. Dum iter faciunt. Right here, we've got dum plus an indicative verb. So this looks like a temporal clause because it says while something is happening. Iter faciunt, of course, that's the Romans' favorite way of saying making a trip. Oh, and we have a bird, aquila. Now, dicatur is interesting because it is one of our kissing verbs where it introduces an indirect statement. Aquila, so the bird is said to have accusative infinitive. That's another way of doing it. They could have said dicit aquilam, but instead they wanted the verb or the bird to be nominative. So the bird is said to have done things. So we'll have to keep our eye out for the indirect statement. But we're going to know that this accusative is part of it. Prepositional phrase here, ab capite, Lucumonis, I guess should be part of that prepositional phrase because it talks about whose head. Oh, and then here's your infinitive verb. So the bird is said to have done this to the Pilium, and also, and again, to have done this. So this is where that ends. So again, aquilam is not accusative, even though we have an indirect statement, because they wanted to make dicatur a personal verb, they wanted to give it a real subject before they introduced the indirect statement. Laeta taniquil acabit id augurium potentiae futurae. Oh, because we know birds tell us the future. Okay, happy taniquil, subject, verb, and then you can assume that there's an essay in here. Id augurium essay inside an understood indirect statement, because we have your accusative, your infinitive, and another infinitive. And then potentiae futurae is simply genitive talking about augurium. Etrusci anum caelestium prodigiorum per iti erant. Ooh, did you notice the word anum here? Remember, that's a nifty word because that's the Romans' way of telling us, hey guys, we're putting a footnote in our text. We don't write with footnotes, but if we did, anum would be the sign instead of a small superscript 1, 2, or 3 number. Instead, that says, hey, here's additional information about the same topic, kind of related, but a little bit off track, so that's why we're putting this in a footnote. Subject, the Etruscans. Okay, we have genitive here. Don't get mixed up by the eum. Caelestium prodigiorum. Those are both genitive plural. And then periti, that means skilled, and errant. So the Etruscans were skilled, and remember, you're always skilled in relation to something in the genitive case. So they knew a bunch about this topic. Postquam Romam venerant, Lucumo nomen Lucius Tarquinium priscum sibi sumsit. Okay, just a little dependent clause here. After they had done this, again, we've got that Romam in the vocative, or not the vocative, the locative case. We have a subject, nominative, direct object. Ooh, Lucius Tarquinius. So this is referring to the name right there. My bad. Lucius Tarquinius Priscus. So that goes with Lucius Tarquinius. Sibi, of course, is dative, going back to Lucumo, because Sibi always points back to the subject. And then Sumpsus. So Lucumo took up this name, Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, for himself. Oh, looks like an identity change. Ibi Paulatum insignis factus est, de vitiis aliisque rebus. I just added the rest of the sentence on the end so we wouldn't have to turn the page. Okay, adverb, a little bit there. Insignis factus est. Oh, I think this is, the subject is Lucumo, and he became this nominative. And how or why did he do it? Because of de vitiis, because of one ablative there, and ablative 2 here, other random things. Postremo in amicitiam regis receptus tutor liberorum regis testamento institutus est. Well, apparently, whatever he did, he was really good at it, because finally, prepositional phrase, regis, talks about that. Okay, we have this participle, having been received, where? Into this. So this is a participle referring to Lucumo, our subject. Tutor, well, what's up with this nominative? Have to hold that thought. Tutor liberorum. This is a genitive that goes with tutor. We're still trying to figure out what the tutor is doing in the sentence. Regis testamento. This is ablative, and regis is talking about it. So according to the will of the king. Oh, and then this explains everything. Institutus est. He, Lucumo, was made, established, set up as the tutor of the children according to the will of the king. So somehow the king dies off, and Lucumo takes over handling the children according to the will of the king. I guess that's what they really mean by in very much amicitiam. Ancus annos quator et viginti regnavit. So this talks about how long Ancus was around. I guess it's a little bit backwards, because Ancus ruled for this period of time, and after he died, This is what Lucumo did. So it would have been nice if they had given us this sentence before, but you can handle that.